Today we're going to be looking at the unit circle. Notice how there is one unit around the circle. Okay, the first point is 1, 0. As you move up to the top of the circle, it moves to 0, 1, just like it does on our regular axes of X and Y. As you go around the circle, it moves to negative 1, 0, and then all the way at the bottom you see 0, negative 1. So that just goes to show how the entire circle is one unit, hence our name unit circle. There are also 4 quadrants. As you move around to the left, you notice it's quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are also signs that are associated with each quadrant. So if you're in the first quadrant, which is all the way in the right corner, as you are on a regular coordinate graph, the points on the x-axis are positive, and they're also positive on the y-axis, which is why you will notice in our coordinate points, they both will be positive. Then you'll see in quadrant 2 you have negative, positive, quadrant 3 will both be negative, and quadrant 4 will be positive and then negative. I like to begin with looking at the degrees. The circle will start at 0 degrees, and then it will go up to 30, 45, and 60. At the top you have 90 degrees, which would make our right angle. As you continue to follow this pattern in quadrant 2, you'll be increasing by 30, 45, and 60, which would make 120, 135, and 150. And this pattern will continue. Okay, we get our straight line of 180, and again you'll see the 30, 45, 60, giving us 210, 225, and 240. Lastly, in our 4th quadrant, this pattern will continue. We'll have 270 straight down. We'll have 270 straight down, and then the pattern will continue again to 300, 315, 330, and lastly 360, which would make a full circle. With the unit circle, we often use radians. Okay, 360 is also 2 pi radians. If 360 degrees is 2 pi radians, then across from your 180 degrees will be your pi, which would be half the distance. Up top in your 0, 1 coordinate, you see it's pi over 2. Down the bottom, you see it's 3 pi over 2. Now we're going to look at the rest of the radians. There's a pattern I want you to notice. Notice up top here it is 2, 3, 4, and 6. As you move around your circle, you'll notice the same pattern. 2, 3, 4, 6. And you'll see it one more time on the bottom. It will move its way up. 2, 3, 4, 6. And lastly, in your last quadrant, 2, 3, 4, and 6. So we notice we have that pattern in the denominators. Now we're going to look at our numerators. In our first quadrant, we have pi, or 1 pi, on the top. When we look at the radians in our second coordinate, we see that the numerators are all 1 less than the denominator. If you look at this point here, you have 6, and our numerator is 1 less 5. Here we see 4 and 3, and last 3 and 2. Okay, when we look at the radians in our third quadrant, we have a little bit different here. The numerators are 1 more this time. Okay, so you have 2, 3, so it's increasing by 1, 3, 4, 4, 5, and lastly 6, 7. And looking at the radians in our fourth quadrant, this time we see that our numerator is 1 less than twice the denominator. So if we look at 5 pi over 3 here, if you have 3, okay, 2 of that would be 6, and it's 1 less 5. Here, 4 times 2 is 8, 1 less is 7. And 6 times 2 is 12, and it's 1 less, which is 11. So that's how we're able to get the radians. Lastly, we're going to be looking at the coordinate points that are outside of the unit circle, where you see your parentheses. With this, we have a pattern as well. You'll notice there will be a 2 in all of the denominators, so I'm going to go ahead and fill all of those in. Okay, you can fill these in while I'm filling them in as well. And now we're going to work on our numerators. 2, 3. Okay, each of these get a radical. However, the radicals of 1 would just be 1, so the 1 will stay. This will be a root of 2 and a root of 3. Now on the right side of the coordinate, it's going to go in the reverse direction, so you'll have 1, 2, and 3. And again, you'll put in your radical bars, except the 1 will not have a radical since the square root of 1 will just be 1. Since our first quadrant is all positive, we'll have positive values for all of those. Okay, we'll see a little different once we move to the second quadrant. Again, we're going to fill in 1, 2, and 3. Okay, we're going to add in our radicals. Again, we're going to not put it in for the 1, so we have it for 2 and 3. And I'm now going to add in my negative signs because notice in the second quadrant that our cosine value are negative. So I'm going to put my negatives in front of all of my x values. And now I'm going to work on the right side and put in 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to put in my square roots one more time. And then those values will remain positive because in the second quadrant we have positive values. Now moving to the third quadrant, again I have 1, 2, and 3. You can fill those in as well. I'm adding in my radical bars and also my negative signs. And going back down, 1, 2, and 3. Adding in my radical bars one more time. And notice here that this time both of these values are going to have negative signs, so just double check yourself, make sure that you have the negatives in front of the x and y coordinates. Okay, now we're at the fourth and final quadrant. We're putting in our 1, 2, 3, putting in my square roots one last final time, and now moving to the right, putting my 1, 2, and 3, putting in my radicals, and then I'm going to be putting in my negative signs on the right because in our fourth quadrant we have positive and then negative values. One last thing I wanted to just add down here is I usually make myself a quick little chart. All students take calculus. It's just a funny little way that I remember which trig functions are positive. So in the first quadrant, all of them are positive. In the second quadrant, only the sine function is positive. In the third quadrant, the tan function is positive. The cosine function is positive. Okay, I hope that helped.